on 24/24 every night until the election. We bring you the latest 2024 campaign news in the last 24 hours with a sneak peek ahead to the next 24 hours. First up today, Politico taking on Bidenomics with this headline that reads, "The White House plays it cool as Bidenomics struggles to catch on." The article goes on to say, in part, President Joe Biden is risking a lot of Bidenomics. But about 2 months into Biden's efforts to sell his sweeping economic agenda, it does not appear to be working, end of quote. Next up, yesterday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talking to NBC News. In the past, DeSantis has successfully sort of tiptoed around, appearing not to want to answer what has become the Republican candidate litmus test question. Here's his answer to who won the 2020 presidential election.
Of course he lost.
Trump lost the 2020 election.
Of course.
Okay.
Joe Biden's the president. But the issue is, I think, what people in the media and elsewhere, they want to act like somehow this was just like the perfect election.
Moving on. Last week, former President Donald Trump pleading not guilty to a third indictment. This indictment comes from Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the 2020 presidential election. Well, yesterday, former Vice President Mike Pence was cornered and answered if he expects to be called as a witness against his former boss, former President Donald Trump. Here is what the former vice president said.
We won that at the lower court level, and ultimately we responded to a subpoena. And I have no plans to testify, but people can be confident we'll obey the law, we'll respond to the call of the law if it comes, and we'll just tell the truth. Look, I've been telling this story over the last 2 years, but I must tell you, over the last week, it seems that more and more Americans have been coming up to me and just expressing a word of appreciation for what, by God's grace, that we did that day.
Moving on Friday, we reported that former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie made an unannounced visit to Ukraine to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky. It turns out Christie also brought Zelensky a gift. Zelensky wants more arms from the United States, but from Christie, he got a handwritten lyrics to the Bon Jovi song, "It's My Life." The handwritten lyrics were from John Bon Jovi himself. Here's what Christie had to say about his gift.
The song "It's My Life," which served as an inspiration for a lot of the citizens in Odessa as they were preparing for the invasion by the Russians. He wrote it out in his own hand, got it framed, and I brought it to President Zelensky, presented to him, and said that this is representative of many of the American people and what they feel about the cause that's being fought for in Ukraine.
Next up, yesterday, 2024 hopeful Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took to Twitter. He discussed, well, perhaps scared is a better way to say it, he discussed how a nuclear war, or scared how nuclear war between the United States and Russia would impact Americans. His tweet read in part, "Is having Ukraine and NATO worth even the slightest risk of a nuclear winter killing 99% of the people living in the United States today? Is it worth the cost already being paid tens of thousands of dead youngsters and families? Billions of American dollars drained from our food banks, our hospitals, our schools, and instead detonated in foreign skies to rip young flesh from bone. Higher gas bills, higher grocery prices, higher utility bills, higher housing costs, too little money in your bank account to pay for them? Tell me, President Biden, how is it worth all this to fight a war that could have ended a month after it began?" End of quote. Moving on, today, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott also took to Twitter. Why? To celebrate National Purple Heart Day. He tweeted, "Today and every day we honor the brave men and women who put themselves in harm's way to protect our freedom. Thanks you for your service. Hashtag Purple Heart Day." End of quote. And lastly, former President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to call out President Joe Biden, posting, quote, "Russia and China would not be putting ships dangerously off the coast of Alaska if I were president. No way, no harm. No respect for Biden." End of quote. Political analyst Mark Halperin joins me. Nice to talk to you, Mark.
Good evening, Greta. Good to see you.
Good to see you. All right, it seems like everyone has to make this political journey, I say political pilgrimage to Ukraine. What is the value of these Republicans, one after another, going? Or is there no longer any value? It's quite a trip. I've taken a long trip to Ukraine.
Yeah, look, I think unless you've been commander-in-chief, even if you've been a senator, in the case of Governor Christie, a governor, not a federal official, you need to show people that you care about foreign policy, national security, you're thinking about it. I can't say that the voters are going to look at Governor Christie and say all of a sudden he's got a PhD in Ukrainian relations, but he can point to that as, making a small sacrifice of danger and the time commitment to go over there. I'm sure you could well see that image we're seeing now in a campaign ad to demonstrate that a guy who has never been a national security official nonetheless has that bona fides. I wouldn't be surprised if others make the trip as well.
Has Robert F. Kennedy Jr. put any dent, real dent, into President Biden's nomination for the Democratic Party, expected nomination?
No, he's done far worse than I thought he would. His announcement event had a lot of themes in it that I thought would strike quite a chord with a lot of Democratic constituencies, independents as well. The worst thing that can happen, Greta, to anyone running for president is to lose control of their public image, to have their identity defined not the way they want it defined, but rather by the way their enemies and opponents want it defined. And Bobby Kennedy has played right into that. He has done a number of things that have been erratic, that have been unsteady, and that have not given people looking for an alternative to Joe Biden a feeling like there's a permission structure to be for him. So I think he squandered a pretty big opportunity, and I'm not sure he can get it back at this point.
Last week, of course, as everyone knows, unless you're living in a cave, which none of us is that President Trump pled not guilty to a third indictment. Is there any way to know whether or not that's impacted him? Have they released any data about polling, any data about donations, anything since, or is it too soon?
I mean, there's data out there. The campaign could tell us what they're raising. The fact that they're not could go either way. They may be saving it to tell us in a few days when the number's even more impressive, or it could be not as big as it was after the first two indictments. And there's no poll that I've seen that's this positive. But look, based on the rhetoric you've seen, very few Republicans have expressed concern about this indictment, at least elite Republicans. And to the contrary, it's caused another rallying around Donald Trump. So I would be surprised if his poll numbers went down in any meaningful way. And I think it does, as you and others have pointed out, it does crowd out the ability of these other candidates to be part of the conversation, which if you're trying to overtake a guy with a 20, 30, or 40-point lead, you need to be in the conversation.
Well, of course, everyone's pretty much is talking about, but I mean, a lot can happen. Is that Trump has got it sewn up for the Republican Party, but it's, at least in my mind, it's still very early. The Democratic side of the aisle, is it too late for any other Democrat to throw his hat in the ring to challenge Biden?
I mean, if somebody serious wanted to run against him, they'd have to get in the next couple months in order to try to qualify for the ballot. It's not just automatic to say, hey, I'm here, I want you to vote for me in the primaries and caucuses. I don't anticipate that happening. I think Joe Biden benefits from a lot. And what he mostly benefits from is the Democratic Party's main organizing principle right now in the context of the presidential race is to not let Donald Trump win the White House back. And as long as they see Joe Biden as the vehicle for that, which most Democrats still do, even the ones who will be holding their breath between now and November 2024, very difficult for anybody to challenge him. There's talk of it. There's concern. There's some people who would like a backup plan. But as of now, I do not anticipate any serious Democrat with the kind of a normal resume to take on an incumbent. I just don't see that. And again, I think Bobby Kennedy could have been that person, but I think so far at least, it looks like he's squandered it.
Obviously, money's a big deal in all these campaigns. You got to raise a lot of money. But are we seeing sort of the diminish? Is that importance going to diminish with social media? Because you can get so much attention on you by social media, where you don't have to spend a dime. You can just sit in your house and do it.
Yeah. Look, it's always been overrated in presidential politics. Money is way too much of a factor in gubernatorial races, Senate races, House races. Earned media, press coverage has always been more important in presidential races. The candidates spend a lot of time raising money, but Trump beat Hillary Clinton with spending less. You don't need that much money if you know how to get attention. And you're right, social media is obviously a huge amplification of that, but so is cable news coverage. So are still to this day newspapers and even magazines. As long as people want to write about you, talk about you, make videos about you on social, on traditional media, raising money is just not as big a deal. And again, you're right, social media has amplified that trend quite a bit.
Mark Halperin, thank you. Always nice to see you.
Good to see you, Greta. Have a great evening.